all know Jesus loved the poor. It's one of the most basic ideas in Christianity. But what if he hated poverty? And what if the tiny gap between those two ideas changes everything about how we live out our faith, especially here in America? For centuries, the main Christian response to poverty has been charity. Giving money, donating cans of food, serving in a soup kitchen. And don't get me wrong, those are good things. But what if they aren't the main thing? What if focusing only on charity is a profound misunderstanding of Jesus' message? Because Jesus didn't just teach us to pity the poor. He came to start a revolution. Let's be real. When we see poverty, our first instinct, drilled into us by tradition, is to help. Give a donation. Volunteer for an afternoon. We see this as answering the call to care for the less fortunate, and in a way it is. But this model of charity, even when it comes from a good heart, has a massive flaw. It's a band-aid on a bullet wound. It treats the symptoms of poverty without ever asking what's causing the disease in the first place. This charity model can feel pretty good for those of us with enough. It lets us feel like we did our part. But it almost never challenges the systems that create and maintain poverty. In fact, sometimes it can accidentally prop them up. When our only move is giving to the poor, we never have to ask the uncomfortable questions about the economic structures, the political policies, or the social norms that guarantee there will always be a line of people needing that charity. The people in power are perfectly fine with a faith that practices charity. It's when faith starts demanding justice that everyone gets nervous. This whole mindset is often propped up by one hugely misunderstood Bible verse. In Matthew 26, Jesus says, "The poor you will always have with you." For 2,000 years, that line has been twisted to justify doing nothing, to suggest that poverty is just a permanent part of life. People use it to argue that if God wanted to end poverty, he would. So our job is just to manage it with handouts. But that interpretation rips Jesus' words completely out of their radical context. He wasn't making some hopeless prediction. He was quoting the Old Testament. And when you see where he was quoting from, you realize he meant the exact opposite. He was giving a command. When Jesus said, "The poor you will always have with you," he was quoting Deuteronomy 15. That passage lays out God's blueprint for a just society. It commands the Israelites to cancel all debts every 7 years and to lend freely to anyone in need. Then it says, "There will be no poor among you, if only you will strictly obey the voice of the Lord your God." The passage goes on to say that it's because people will fail to do this, because of human injustice, that poverty will exist. So when Jesus quotes that line, he isn't saying, "Oh well, poverty is here to stay." He's reminding his audience that poverty is a direct result of their failure to obey God's commands for justice. He's saying their job isn't just charity, but to build a just world. This idea wasn't new. It was built on the foundation of the year of Jubilee from Leviticus 25, a radical social and economic reset button every 50 years. All debts, forgiven. All slaves, freed. All land, returned to its original family owners. Imagine what that would do. It would have made the kind of crushing generational poverty that traps families impossible. It was God's economic plan, rooted in justice, that prevents poverty, not just aid that manages it. Now, think about Jesus' very first sermon in his hometown in Luke chapter 4. He stands up, unrolls the scroll of Isaiah and reads, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim a year acceptable to the Lord." That last line, "a year acceptable to the Lord," powerfully evokes the year of Jubilee. Jesus is kicking off his entire ministry by announcing that he is the great, ultimate Jubilee. His mission wasn't to make poor people feel a little better. It was to announce their liberation, to set the oppressed free, and to launch a revolution of justice that would turn the world upside down. His actions backed it up. When he cleansed the temple, he wasn't just having a bad day. He was launching a direct assault on a corrupt economic system. The temple courts had been turned into a predatory marketplace. Money changers and merchants were ripping off the poor who had traveled for days to worship, forcing them to exchange their money at insane rates and buy overpriced animals for sacrifice. By flipping their tables, Jesus was physically dismantling a system that robbed the poor in God's name. His teachings were just as jarring. He was blunt about how spiritually dangerous wealth is. He didn't just say it was tricky to be rich. He said, how hard it will be for those who have wealth to enter the kingdom of God. Third, we have to put our resources behind justice, not just charity. Because there's a difference between a pseudo wealth that gives out groceries that demands a community organization fighting for a living wage so people can afford to buy their own. Owning things. Both have their place. He was condemning the love of wealth on the first and the unjust systems that let a few hoard riches while others starve. The game itself. And maybe his most chilling teaching, the parable of the sheep and the goat, starts with a single step. Jesus says our eternal judgment comes down to how we treat the most vulnerable. Find one organization in your community that is working for economic justice, not just providing charity. Did you feed the hungry? It could be a group advocating for workers' rights. Did you welcome a stranger, faith worker, justice? It could be a coalition fighting for affordable housing. And then he says, like a partner whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, find a group that's trying to fix the system. And he identifies himself so completely in the comments below that how we treat them is how we treat him. Let's build a resource for each other beyond simple charity. A catalog of this hope. Makes social and economic justice where the real non-negotiable part of following Jesus. Many of us have settled for a comfortable Christianity that living in one of the wealthiest societies in history. It means we're called to a much more radical faith that make that generosity necessary in the first place. How can I help this Jesus poor person? Did not die to make us charitable. Why he died to make us a new kind of people. It forces us to embody his radical love and his revolutionary justice. Following Jesus means we have to hate poverty. He calls us to something more than the injustice, the indignity. He calls us to solidarity, the theft of human potential. He calls us to a fight. Just as much as we love people. Following Jesus means hating poverty means hating the systems. It means loving the poor enough to fight for a world where poverty itself is a thing that can determine your destiny. It means hating that wages haven't kept up for decades while the cost of everything skyrockets. It means hating policies that rig the game for the rich and powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. So how do we start to fight these systems? It starts with a shift in our minds, from charity to justice, and that leads to real action. First, we have to educate ourselves. We need to learn about the real reasons for poverty where we live. What are the housing policies in your city, and who really benefits from them? Do the wage laws in your state allow someone working 40 hours a week to actually live with dignity? We have to be willing to face our own role in these systems. Second, we have to advocate. Our faith was never meant to be private or silent. The Old Testament prophets didn't whisper. They thundered against injustice in the public square. We have to do the same. This means speaking up for fair wages, for affordable housing, for equal access to healthcare and education. It means joining with organizations already deep in this fight. Groups like Sojourners and the Christian Community Development Association are fighting for economic justice, not just handing out aid.